Welcome to the Money Watch Show. It's Saturday, May 10th, and we are here trying to help you make better, less bad financial decisions. The we is me, Jill Schlesinger, CBS News business analyst and certified financial planner, and he is Mark Talercio. Hello, Mark. He's also a financial planner, certified financial planner. Hi, how are you?
Hello, Jill. Happy May 10th. How are you?
Now, I'm well, but we're going to have to give the people, the good people listening, a little bit of the sausage making here, because we taped an interview with a really nice guest, but we did so when I was still under the weather. So you hear my crystal clear pipes today. They sound good, right?
Yeah, just give it a couple of minutes.
Yeah, exactly right.
Sounds like you sucked on a bit of helium.
Oh, boy. Okay. So today we are airing an interview that we conducted with Thomas Racca. He is from Navy Federal Credit Union. And we wanted to interview him and we had to tape this in advance. So we were highlighting Military Appreciation Month, which is now May. And he's a personal finance expert. We wanted to get him on the air. So Mark's like, oh my God, you sound terrible in this interview. And now you sound good. And it's going to sound weird. But I'm saying, too bad. I still want to air the interview. So gang, thanks for all the chicken soup and the well wishes. I'm recovered. If you've got any questions about this segment, if you've got a question about your own financial life, just go to jillonmoney.com, click the contact us button, write us a note. And if you'd like to join us live, check the box. Mark will do everything else. Best producer ever. So right now, here is my scratchy voice, Brenda Vaccaro, Demi Moore imitation. I'm interviewing Thomas Racca of Navy Federal Credit Union. Well, it is May, and we are excited to highlight and bring to you Military Appreciation Month. Yeah, that's what's happening. And as part of this process, we have partnered with Navy Federal Credit Union to talk about how people in the military, whether they're active duty or veterans and their families, should think about managing their finances. And the cool thing about this is, even though we're highlighting military and families, it's everybody. All of this makes sense. So Navy Federal Credit Union brought to us a wonderful guest. His name is Thomas Racca. He is a personal finance expert. He's manager of Navy Federal Credit Union's personal finance management team. So he manages a team of financial counselors. They promote financial literacy. Last month was Financial Literacy Month. He also helps provide budgetary guidance to Navy Federal's members. He's worked at Navy Federal for nearly 2 decades. How about that? And he also luckily has a BA in psychology. So Thomas, that makes you perfectly trained as a BA in psychology for so much of the financial stuff that you have to deal with, right? Because so much of it is about what we think in our heads and how we make sense of that and turn that into action, right?
Oh, no question, Jill. So much of getting our finances on track, it all starts in the mind and creating the habits to be successful long term.
I'm just wondering for you, I know that you're dealing with so many folks that are active duty, but as well as veterans. We hear from these people all the time. And often when we're hearing from them, they are transitioning. They are transitioning from a life in the military and maybe about to go to a second career or a third career. But when you start to talk to people, how soon in the process do you want to get them tuned up? Like, these are mostly young folks, the young guys and gals who are in active duty. When do you want to get them?
I will tell you, we talk to folks to your point, we talk to folks at each stage from the time they're entering the military to the time they may get themselves into trouble, to looking to transition out of the military. How soon do we want to talk to them? It's like the best time to plant a tree, right? Yesterday was the best day, and today is the next best. When you know that you're going to have changes coming to your financial life, you can always benefit from having a conversation with an expert. You can talk to your friends, you can talk to your family members, you can talk to some of the resources that may be available on base, but doing as much preparation as you can, as early as you can, gives you more runway to put that plan into action.
But it's interesting. When I think of someone who's in the military, again, we've talked to a lot of folks. It's like anybody starting off in their financial journey. Do you find that they're getting into trouble quickly, or that you're helping them clean up something that has happened before they entered into the military? Because the military, at least you've got, what your salary is going to be, what your housing is going to be. So do you think that there's like this part of like the beginning stages? Is it a cleanup, or is it just getting the best habits in place as they have more consistent earning potential?
For a lot of folks that enter the military, this is, to your point, their first steady paycheck, and knowing what their pay is, and often going in and saying, well, I'm going to have this amount for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, whatever the case may be. That type of security can lead to bad financial decisions.
Mm.
One of the things that we see most commonly, and it's almost a running joke, but what are the vehicles that you see on a military base? Right? There's almost always the Mustangs, the Camaros, the Chargers. You get these young guys in there, and they say, "Well, this is my paycheck. This is what I want to get involved in. I want to have such and such a status symbol to keep up with the other guys that have done this." And unfortunately, there's so many businesses right around military bases that will actively try and prey on these new recruits, right?
Mm.
And they can
Mm.
find themselves. They don't know what an interest rate is. You get a car salesman that's saying it's only this amount of money for this amount of time, and they don't realize that sports car that they bought is just going to be something to get them from A to B in 2, 3, 4 years. And the amount of money that they're going to pay in interest on those accounts can be staggering.
It's funny. Like, we're really talking about very basic facts that we all have to deal with in our financial lives, right? And I know that, when you look at you're starting off, or listen, sometimes you stumble a little bit along the way. You're restarting off, right? So
Mm.
let's talk a little bit about how you see the approach to money management, savings, debt pay down. How do you suggest that people start? Where do you say we should start?
This is without a doubt, Jill, my favorite part of the conversations. I don't know how many people listen to any given podcast or read any given article, but with millions of folks out there in the military, retired military, or just trying to get an idea of how to get their finances in order, you have to recognize that we're all in different places. So we might be talking to someone who hasn't opened a credit card before. We might be talking to someone who's drowning in credit card debt. We might be talking to someone who's really responsible and is trying to find out how to climb the next rung on the ladder to financial success. Unequivocally, the first step that anybody needs to take is know your numbers. And
Mm.
that is my stake in the ground. If you don't know how much you have coming in, and then how much you have going out on your fixed expenses and your variable expenses, then the rest of the conversation doesn't matter. So the first step that you're going to have to take is sit down, pen and paper, or Excel, or an app, or whatever the case may be, in today's world, and plot out, what are you really spending, not just on rent or mortgage or your fixed car note, but what is your electric bill? What is your gas bill? What is your Uber Eats bill? And then look to make adjustments, and you can build from there, but you have to know your numbers to be able to take the next steps no matter where you're at in your journey.
You're sort of agnostic about what tools someone uses, because you just said pen, paper, spreadsheet. Do you think that apps are helpful in this? Because in some ways, I think it's awesome. Like, you have an app, it can track a bunch of stuff. And on the other hand, sometimes the old school of like, oh, you get a bill, you understand what that bill is, you're writing a check. There's a weird part of this that it's like you're more connected to your spending under the old system than under the technologically advanced system. What do you think about that?
I am all about meeting people where they're at and giving them the tools they need to be successful. If you are more comfortable sitting down with your spouse, your significant other, your roommates, your parents, and putting a pen to paper and pulling out paper copies of bills and filling it out, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to be high tech and use an aggregator that's going to download all of your spending and classify it for you and tell you where you may be overspending or underspending, that's fine too. We speak with people every month that want to speak to a live human being. And we have some folks that we talk to that will say, well, what's an article I can read? What's a podcast I can listen to? What do you suggest for not only tracking, but for learning the next steps? And if that's YouTube, if that's podcasts, if that's reading an article, or if that's talking to trusted sources from your parents to your credit union, then you take whatever steps you need to do to move yourself along further in the process.
Now, are you a fan of the B word? Oh, wait, be careful. I'm not trapping you. The budget word. Because I always feel like once I say budget, people's eyes glaze over. So what I try to just say is exactly what you said, which is when you say know your numbers, I just say like track what's coming in, track what's going out. Because I feel like sometimes people try to live and die by these artificial budgetary numbers, like, oh, I have to keep this to this percentage of this. But we have to also deal in reality. Some people walk in, their student loans. As you said, some people have credit card debt. Are you a fan of budgeting, or do you feel like it is like I'm going on a diet and the diet is over in 2 weeks?
You'd be amazed how much we see it. And I'm going to put it in the absolute simplest way that I can, Jill.
Mm.
Like I said before, knowing your numbers is the first step. And if you don't know your numbers, the rest of it doesn't matter. I love the analogy that you use for the diet. And in fact, this is how I often describe it to people. People say, I want to get healthier. I want to lose weight. Well, if you don't know how much you weigh to start out with, then how are you going to know what the progress looks like? If
Mm.
you don't know your blood pressure, your cholesterol, all of your health markers, then you can't gauge where you're at because you don't know where you were. And the budget is the same way. You're right. People do tend to glaze over when they hear these conversations start because it's not fun and no one likes to see where they might be spending too much. But again, you have to go through that, and then it doesn't have to be rigorous from there. But you do need to know, hey, am I spending too much on rent? Am I spending too much on eating out? Am I spending too much on my car insurance? And then from there, quite frankly, I see this every day in different income brackets. I see
Mm.
people making $2,000 a month that are check to check, and I see people at ten and $15,000 a month that are living check to check.
Wait, I want to just
There's
pause right there. That is so important what you just said, because often we will hear from people who will say, oh, these rich people, they don't know what I'm going through. But somehow when people start, as you said, you can earn a lot of money and get yourself in trouble. You could have decided that you are paying a lot of money to, maybe buy a house you couldn't afford or spend too much money or have too much debt and still make a lot of money, but that money isn't being captured. So I think that's a very wise thing to say. It happens at every income level. And, I know that, listen, we've heard from many, many in the military. And I think that there's this sense like, you kind of understand what your progression will be for your career in the military, right? But for a lot of others who are not in the military, I always think that the lesson we're getting right now in the workforce is what you thought was going to be your trajectory throughout your career may not be. And you have to be able to react to it. So I'm wondering how often you have people look at do you say know your numbers every single year? Like how often do you think people should be checking in on this?
a year is a great cadence. Make a baseline of where you're at. Know your basics, and then make it a habit to check in and make sure that your ground in reality is pretty consistent. About once every 6 months thereafter. If you see something start to go out of control, pull back and re-examine. And then anytime there's a seismic life change. Okay, if you get
Mm-hmm.
married, if you have a child, if you get divorced, if you get a raise, if you get a promotion, whatever it may be, those are always great catalysts. to sit back down, and especially when you come into money. Tax time, if you're getting a tax return, is a great trigger for this, but it is a wonderful opportunity to revisit how much am I putting into my savings account, and is this an opportunity to continue to try and live below my means instead of trying to live above my means.
So, how important once you get the numbers down, like you know your numbers, and let's say you've paid off your debt, you're smart, you've paid off your debt. How much do you suggest when people just begin their service in the military or starting their own careers elsewhere? What are you trying to do in terms of saving for retirement? How do you get them thinking about that, especially the young ones? How do you get them focused on it?
Jill, I will tell you that that was a huge jump to say we've gotten the credit card debt paid off. But if you have gotten yourself into this phase where the debt is paid off and you can start to look long term, especially with our younger service members, this is where the time is money discussion really comes into play. So many people don't see the magnitude of compound interest. What's a good rule of thumb? I would say trying to get 15% of your income, however that comes from an employer match or whatever the case may be. 15% is a great marker to try and get into a retirement account. But if you can't hit that in your 20s, even your early 30s, don't worry about it. Get in the habit. If you make it a habit that this is how I live, I am someone that saves. I identify as a saver. When you come into these other opportunities, the additional savings will come, and the miracle that is compound interest will really take care of you when you get to your retirement age.
So also, I know that because service folks will be often entitled to a pension, that they give themselves short shrift on their own contribution. So I always just like to say, look, just do as much as you possibly can. You know, you're starting off, like you said, there may be competing forces, but obviously it's imperative to get people really in that saving habit. So let's go back to your horrible debt situation that some folks come into. So let's look at this. Let's say, let's take a typical young service person. They've got credit card debt of, let's say, 5 grand, and it's high interest, right? So let's just say it's at 25%. They have an auto loan. Let's say that that's 10 grand and that's at 9%. And maybe they have a couple $1,000s in their savings. How do you think they can not just pay down their debt, but also boost their savings? And what's the right balance that you see? I mean, it's a little different. Listen, when I give advice to folks, I think that in old Jill, post financial crisis Jill, I was like, oh my God, pay down debt first. But then I think during the pandemic, I was like, emergency reserves are really important also. So I sort of like to make sure we're doing a little bit of everything. What do you think is the right way to approach 5 grand of credit card debt, 10 grand of auto loan, and basically no savings? How should the pay down strategy look like? What should it look like?
I love one of the things you touched on there with trying to do it all. And you need to have some kind of an emergency fund on hand because life is going to happen to you no matter who you are. But here's how I like to illustrate it to people. When your credit card rate 25%, your car note is 9, 10%, and you look at what is that savings account actually earning you? Obviously you're not going to time the market with your investments. If you're in a mutual fund, hopefully you're in a good state of consistent growth. But generally, when you look at the market, you are not going to expect a rate of return in the mid 20%, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's unheard of.
Right.
Our 401ks would be worth a lot more than they are.
Right, right, right.
And that market's up and down. So here's what I would say. You keep a nominal amount on hand for emergencies, and that might be 500 or 600 bucks to replace a tire or a minor car repair. It might be upwards of 1,500 if you're a little bit more conservative. But once you have that money banked, then you need to turn around and start aggressively paying off your debt. And the two biggest ways to do that, the most commonly known, are the avalanche method and the snowball method. And I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds, but I'll give you the gist of it here. With a snowball method, you would take your smallest bill amount and you would make minimum payments on, in this case, you'd make minimum payments on your higher balance. So in this case, your car note would get a minimum note, and you would take every extra dollar you have, and you know how many extra dollars you have because you've done your budget, and you know how much you have coming in and going out, and all of those extra funds would go towards aggressively paying off your smallest debt. And if you had a bunch of small bills, you would pay off the one, get that sense of satisfaction, and then you would take that money that you were putting towards the smallest debt and put it towards the next smallest debt. Now, if you just have the two bills, then this math becomes pretty easy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you do the one that's $5,000 and then you do the one that's $10,000. But we see pretty frequently someone has $200 here, $1,000 here,
Yeah.
$3,000 there. So the snowball method is exactly what it sounds like. It picks up steam, it keeps you engaged, it costs you a little bit more in interest because it's agnostic to the interest rate tied to the accounts, but it keeps you plugged in, and it's how most people are successful. I will say the other method, and it's harder to stick to, is that avalanche approach, and that's where you do the same approach, but you throw your money at the highest interest rate.
That's what
Now,
I do. I like that
right?
one because you know why? Because I'm such a nerd. Because to see that highest, I know it's very unpopular because like the payoff of having something be done is great. So we get back to you're a psychology major, right? I get that. But it is so hard for a nerd like me to look at a 25% interest rate and not say, I am going to take every last dollar and pay that sucker off as quickly as I can because the not doing it costs so much more money. But I understand both methods. I really do. I really do get that.
But
So let me ask.
you touched on it with the diet, right?
Yep.
My
Yep.
diet's over in 2 weeks, and we're not that far from the new year, and all of those New Year's resolutions went in, and then quickly we got to quitting day. If you're in the gym religiously, you'll notice it's a lot less crowded now than it was on January 4th.
So true. So, do you guys have an opinion on the buy now, pay later movement? Because I know that a lot of young people really have been drifting over there away from the credit card. So, where you say, okay, I'll spread this out over 4 payments, and that way I will not be charged any interest. But then I think folks are so shocked when all of a sudden 4 months goes by, they haven't been able to make the payment, and now they do have to pay interest. So, do you offer opinions about the buy now, pay later movement?
Any debt that you're going to take on, car, credit card, whatever it may be, you always need to really take a step back and look at what is it that I can afford. In today's world, the BNPL stuff isn't showing up on a credit report, and
Right.
it's not captured in a lot of household debts. So we want to be mindful that this could be something that is wonderful for some folks, for some of the population. Don't let it become a slippery slope like it can with any other type of debt, and put yourself in a position where you're going to be overextended. Don't take buy now, pay later as, oh, this is just an interest-free way of doing something. I can afford these big ticket items. As with anything, use caution. Make the decision that's best for yourself and your household, and be mindful that if you don't make the payments as scheduled, fees can start to rack up, and it can appear on your credit if you don't maintain those payments.
So I want to get to just like the mantra of Navy Federal Credit Union in general, because I think that a lot of people that hear our conversations with military folks are often struck by the fact hey, they seem to be in very good shape, which is true because we're talking to them later in their careers in many cases, right? So, Thomas, you've already worked your magic on them. They paid off their debt. They're in that savings habit. And a lot of them are able to take advantage of wonderful programs through the government. I think that what many people don't realize is how many people are actually entitled to work with Navy Federal Credit Union because you don't have to be active duty. So can you talk about who is actually able to work with you guys and how many people does that actually include?
I love this. and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I will tell you our membership is open to the military, the DoD, and their families. And that does include retirees. So one of the stories that we see pretty frequently is someone's out in town, they're wearing their Navy Federal shirt, and someone walks up to them and says, "Oh man, I wish I could be a member." And we say,
Mm.
"Oh, okay, well, were you active duty?" "No." "Okay, well, were your parents active duty?" "Oh, yeah, well, my father served." "Oh, okay, well, great, then you're eligible for membership." And
Mm.
there are so many one-off ways that you can join. If you're curious, I recommend visiting a branch, going online, NavyFederal.org, or just calling our 800 number. They will do a check for you, and it's a sizable amount of the population. And we would love to have everyone that's eligible join, jump in here and be part of the greatest credit union on earth.
How about the resources that you guys offer? Because I presume that a lot of the resources are available to anyone, not just folks who are members of the credit union, right?
We talked earlier about people wanting to be taught different things, different tools, and being able to meet them where they're at. If you go to NavyFederal.org, you can look at our Making Sense material, and we have so many tools there, from videos and articles to podcasts, where you can cover any variety of topics. No matter what your questions are, and this is for our members and for the general public. It's free of charge. It's there. It's vetted. It's tremendous information. If you are a member and you have a question on something, you can always dial in, speak with the personal finance management team here at Navy Federal, and we can help you with your general setting up your budget, answering some general questions for you, and we can get you pointed in the right direction for whatever your next steps may be.
Hi, me again. I'm back with my better voice. Thanks so much for listening. If you've got a question, just go to jillonmoney.com and click the Contact Us button. You can subscribe to us on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Mark Talercio is the very best co-host, executive producer, and king of all things web. We drop our episodes here on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. If you would not mind, try to do something nice for someone else today. Change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.